All right, well, we finally made it to the fifth and final part of my Q&A series from the Pacific Crest Trail 2023. In this, we're kind of like sweeping up with any sort of specific questions which didn't fit neatly into any of the previous categories. So here we are, part 5, specific questions.
Next one.
All right, so final section is very specific questions.
Lenny Hikes and Richard in Japan both ask, how difficult was it to obtain an entry permit for Canada? Any advice for others?
So this was the first year in 3 years where Canada was allowing PCTers to enter at Manning Park on account of COVID-19. And honestly, the process was super straightforward and easy. I already had a passport, so that big hurdle was already cleared. And both myself as well as every other hiker who I asked about this, there's probably about half a dozen other hikers, pretty much everyone who applied for their permit got a response like within a week. It's a free permit, it's 2 pages, pretty easy to do. I applied for my permit in Etna, California, which was 48 days and just over 1,000 miles before I made it to Canada. And I had Daphne mail my passport to me in Snoqualmie, which was 12 days and 300 miles prior to Canada. I would recommend doing it this way. I think applying for your entry to Canada from Etna is easy because there's a library there that has a scanner. You're going to need a scanner, and it's far enough in advance. Again, for me it was 48 days, where it gives you enough time to hedge and gives them plenty of time to reply. Gives you enough time to reply to them if they are missing some piece of information. Similarly, by mailing my passport to Snoqualmie instead of Thru-Hike or anywhere else, it gave me enough time to receive it and feel good about it. I mean, I did wind up carrying it for 300 miles before I needed it. So if that really bothers you, then mail it to Snoqualmie, I guess. But if you're not super bothered, I would recommend mailing it to Snoqualmie as well.
Awesome. Blue Clister asks, you mentioned you were cold on your side and would roll over on your back to warm up. What air mattress were you using, and do you think that had a lot to do with you feeling cold?
So I used 2 different air mattresses or sleeping pads over the course of the hike. The first one was the Thermarest X-Therm, Thermarest Neo Air X-Therm. This one I used until it developed a hole in the Sierra at Mammoth, just before Mammoth. And then I switched out to the Thermarest Neo Air X-Therm NXT, which is a little bit thicker, a little bit lighter, and a little bit warmer. And I used the NXT until the end of the trail. I do not blame this sleeping pad for me sleeping cold. That is an amazing sleeping pad. I love it. What happened when I was getting cold, I think, is that like if I'm sleeping on a super warm sleeping pad like this, there's more surface area of me in contact with the sleeping pad. Whereas if I'm sleeping on my side like this, there's far less of my body on the sleeping pad. And so I'm not utilizing its insulative properties when there's less of me contacting it. Mm-hmm. So I love the Thermarest sleeping pads. They do, I mean, periodically develop holes. Sometimes you're able to locate those holes. In this case, I wasn't able to locate the hole, so I just wound up replacing it because I didn't have the time or bandwidth to deal with it. But yeah, sleeping on your back is going to be warmer than sleeping on your side.
Very cool. Valerie DeMumbrum is asking you to talk more about your resupply boxes. Where to send them besides post offices? Did you always use resupply boxes, or did you resupply in some towns?
Okay, I don't have any dietary restrictions. Let me start here. This doesn't sound like it's related, but I don't have any sort of food requirements or dietary restrictions. So for me personally, resupplying in towns is generally the far better way to do it. When you're relying on resupply boxes, for one, whatever money you save by buying stuff in bulk, you're probably going to lose again off the cost of shipping it. And when you're relying on resupply boxes, you're sort of at the mercy of whatever business or post office to which you've dispatched that parcel in order to claim it. So you're going to be running into issues with hours of places, basically. I sent supplies to several different, so I broke this question up into 2 separate categories. Where did I mail supplies and where did I send food? Generally, wherever I sent food, I also sent some supply, either socks or whatever else. But I did send supplies only and not food to Idlewild. I sent supplies to my buddy Landfill in Southern California and then claimed them from him. I sent supplies to Ridgecrest, California by way of my parents who came out before I went into the Sierra. I sent supplies to Bernie, California, and I sent supplies to Snoqualmie, Washington. I sent food to many places. To Acton, KOA in Southern California, I sent 4 days of food. To Hikertown, 3 days of food. To Sayed Valley, I sent 2 days of food. I did also send supplies to South Lake Tahoe, to Cascade Locks, and to Ashland, Oregon, although none of those 3 stops require boxes. You could have resupplied from any of those towns just fine. And then I did send resupply boxes to all of Washington. I didn't resupply on food at all in Washington. So from Bend, Oregon, on day 136, I sent resupply boxes to Trout Lake. I sent 3 days of food. To White Pass, 3 days of food. To Snoqualmie, 4 days of food. Stevens Pass, 2.5 days of food. And to Stehekin, 4 days of food. Those are the specifics. So it can be cheaper to mail resupply boxes to post offices because they don't charge any money to claim them. Although a lot of small town post offices have extremely limited hours, to potentially include being closed on weekdays, potentially to include being closed after 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something.
Oh, wow.
Some post offices I've encountered are only open a couple hours a day, a couple days a week. So you're kind of risking that element if you're dealing with post offices. With businesses, they might charge $5, $10, even $20 to claim a box, which can get pretty ridiculous, to be honest. So, I mean, you just got to negotiate that sort of thing going in. I think that's about all I have to say about boxes. I don't know. The reason why I mailed boxes to Washington is because there were no super easy resupplies throughout Washington. The reason why I mailed food to other places is there weren't any super easy resupply options in those places. So it'd behoove you to have conversations with hikers while you're on trail and research somewhat. I mean, again, Halfway Anywhere is a great website, a great resource for ascertaining what those who have hiked before you have done with respect to which towns they've sent resupply boxes to. Yeah, check out Halfway Anywhere and then do a little bit of research.
Hammer Wrench is curious about how far into the long trails you peaked physically. Did you deteriorate afterward or maintain? Was it different on each trail? How much did topography play into it?
Peak physically. I don't really know. I feel like that's a very self-aggrandizing thing to suggest. When do I peak physically? I don't know. Definitely not before 500 miles, I don't think. You're still sort of like getting your feet dialed in, getting your legs, knees, hips, shoulders dialed in. It takes a little while to really get going, although probably this would be ameliorated somewhat if I were to train more beforehand. Once you feel good about moving that many miles for that many hours a day with that degree of regularity, I do think that that specific aspect of it does maintain for the rest of the trail. But at least for me and a lot of other hikers I've dealt with and interacted with, there is some atrophy or attrition that happens to the body. Again, I mentioned just in a 31-day period losing 10 to 15 pounds.
Oh, that's wild.
That's tough for the body to rebound from that. And then again, one of the sort of tongue-in-cheek jokes, one of the ways I look on Thru-Hiking as well is eat as much as you can and finish before you starve to death. Because that's just kind of the way it works. The hiking is easy, but the fatigue and the attrition and the atrophy is tough, and that only accrues. That doesn't get better. So you try and manage it as best you can, but you're deteriorating your stores of your body. The only thing I'll say about was it different on each trail is that I did pretty much bonk on the AT up in New Hampshire, somewhere, gosh, I forget the name of the town, but somewhere up in New Hampshire. It was right after coming off the Presidential Traverse and right before going into the Wildcats. I wound up taking more zeros there than I had planned on taking at all, and then had a really hard time pulling out of there just because my body was totally depleted. And it was such a horrific experience for me that I really resigned to learn from that and never put myself back in that position. So ever since that experience on the AT, I've been far more deliberate about smashing in calories and never again totally hitting that total bottomed out, because it was hard. It was real hard. And yeah, topography. I'll say the only thing about topography I'll mention as it comes to this question is that early in a hike, at least for me personally, early in a hike, I've noticed that I look forward to going downhill and I don't look forward to going uphill. And then later in a hike, that totally inverts. Later in a hike, going uphill is totally fine, I don't care. And going downhill is more troublesome because it's just percussive on the knees.
Yeah.
And with some amount of cardiovascular fitness and tone in your legs, going uphill is not a problem. But going downhill, it doesn't matter how fit you are, it's still going to be that same percussive business. Yeah.
Adventures with Wilhelm, Daddy May, Texas Tornado, Landon Garland ask, how did it cost not counting gear? Which was most expensive of the 3 trails?
So, as I've already mentioned in another earlier question, I don't track my budget at all, unfortunately. I try and keep it as cheap as I can, but I also understand that it's just not a cheap endeavor outright. So, in order to get you some semblance of answer to this question, I looked up the aforementioned Halfway Anywhere PCT survey from 2022, which is the most recent year. And on average, a PCT through hike, according to Halfway Anywhere, costs $9,593, which is $69 a day. Although there's a pretty large discrepancy between domestic hikers and international hikers. For domestic hikers in 2022, it was $7,900, $7,981, and then for international, it was $9,857. So just about $2,000 more for international than domestic hikers.
Wow, that's a lot. Daddy May is wondering about hydration. Do you drink or attempt to drink at certain intervals or just when thirsty? How much water per day average, knowing it depends upon effort, length, weather, any additional supplements?
So I try, and my MO is to drink as much water as possible, kind of with a mentality that I never know exactly what the next water source is going to be. This year on the PCT, I had good luck. But I always try and stay ahead on hydration. I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. And frankly, my approach is, if I can stay hydrated right now, I'm hedging against what may wind up being water scarcity later today or tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah.
So I try and drink as much as I can. I think the most I ever drank in a day was probably around 10 or 12 liters of water. That's like 3 gallons. And then if it's a colder day, or if it's a mostly downhill day, or if it's a shady day, like a cloudy day, then I might drink as little as 4 liters in a day, but usually it would be a minimum of 4 liters a day, usually a maximum on average of like 8 or so liters, 8 or 9 liters a day. When I get to a water source, I'll slam a liter and carry out 2 is kind of like the standard. I deviate from that somewhat regularly, but my standard is slam a liter, carry out 2. The only goals I have with drinking water is generally I'll drink a liter before I even consider adding electrolytes to anything, and then I'll add electrolytes, 1 liquid IV pouch, generally once or twice a day, just depending how hot it is and how much I'm working and how much I'm sweating.
Interesting. What flavor do you like of the liquid IV?
I like a lot of the flavors. I like lemon lime, I like watermelon, I like all of them. I like the acai berry, I like the passion fruit. I don't think there's a flavor I don't like. The cherry I'm not crazy about, but it's fine. And then as far as, what was there, another question about supplements in there?
Any additional supplements, yeah?
So the only other supplements I take is I take a Mins 1 a day, every single day, and I take glucosamine as well, every morning and every night. So I think it's 2,000 milligrams of glucosamine a day, and 1 Mins 1 a day every day.
Lovely. Diane H. is wondering what you eat on through hikes.
So I did cover this in a couple videos. My day 53 video, where I was prepping for the Sierra, I go through all the food I was going to eat in the Sierra. And then on my day 136 from Bend, Oregon, I go through all of my resupply boxes that I sent to the entirety of Washington. Beyond this, I will have one more video just about what I eat on through hikes that I'll link in the description down below. If you need it. Otherwise, check out day 53 for the Sierra, day 136 from Bend.
And last question, Mary Quart is wondering if it was easy to resupply at stores along the trail, and if you had a bounce box, what was in it?
So it was, for the most part, on the PCT pretty easy to resupply in towns. There were a couple of exceptions. Again, pretty much all of Washington, it was, difficult to resupply in all of Washington. But otherwise, I mean, check out halfwayanywhere.com. Again, that survey that they do from through hikers is super, super informative. I did have a bounce box, and you can check out exactly what was in it on my PCT loadout video. This is the video I did of all my gear from before I started the trail. And it was a lot of odds and ends. It was extra socks. I also threw a Sharpie in there, as well as tape so that I could keep mailing it forward. Also labels that I would be able to put on for the next place to where I would be mailing it. Extra GoPro lenses, extra liquid IVs, extra little business cards. I had some business cards made up for this hike. I also bounced hair clippers that I could give myself a haircut, and a percussive massager. It was the Irkin B37 percussive massagers that I'd have that in town. So
yeah,
that's it. Thanks so much. Hope you guys really enjoyed these Q&As. Check it out. All right, guys, thanks so much again for watching. That concludes our 5-part series of the Q&A from the Pacific Crest Trail 2023. Really, really appreciate you guys checking it out. If you want to stay in touch, keep following this channel. Be sure to hit like, hit subscribe. If I missed any questions, please do drop a comment down below, and I'll be sure to respond to you. So anyways, I'll talk to you next time, guys. Thanks so much. That's it. Yeah, enjoy. That should be great.
Great.
Oh my goodness.